Hey guys, today we're talking about Enron. Well, sort of. We're also talking about psychology, and most of all, we're talking about a message board poster named E.M. Schultz. Why? Because his Motley Fool posts from 2001 are part primary source historical document, part case study. They show how it feels to see a business that was the seventh largest in the entire United States go bankrupt in a matter of months and take a bunch of your money with it. The rise and fall of Enron has been covered well in several places, including in the feature-length film The Smartest Guys in the Room and Wondery's American Scandal podcast series. The key things to understand are that the company was wildly successful, or at least it appeared to be, that it was run by some extraordinarily bright and equally arrogant individuals, including Jeff Skilling and Andy Fastow, and that the company, and those two in particular, had fabricated earnings for years thanks to deceptive accounting practices. Also, rather than just sitting back and watching the train speed towards E.M. Schultz, we're going to watch him pass through the 5 stages of grief as formally put forth by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in her 1969 book On Death and Dying. These are denial, anger, bartering, depression, and acceptance. E.M. Schultz, in his own way, experiences all of these as he watches his shares become worthless. So, let's get to it. We joined the message board in August of 2001. Shares have been trading in the low to mid 40s. Jeff Skilling, who had spent years positioning himself as Ken Lay's successor as CEO of Enron, just resigned from that very post even though he'd taken over just a few months ago. Enron's press release stated that he'd done this for personal reasons. Jim Cramer, writing for TheStreet.com, thinks something stinks about this. He says, "I'm sitting here trying to figure out if there was a worse way for Enron to handle Skilling's departure. The more I think about it, the more I realize there wasn't. It would have been better if Enron said that Skilling was resigning and the SEC is investigating accounting. It would have been better to say Skilling was missing, or even that Skilling was fired because he was an idiot." So Cramer nails it here. And when he mentions accounting, maybe people were talking and he already knew. E.M. Schultz, however, rejects this. He says, "I disagree. By nature, I'm a skeptic, but I cannot believe that Enron is lying to the investment community about the reasons for Skilling's departure." A month later, Enron stock, which is already well off its 2000 highs, has fallen further. A financial publication summarizes the reason by writing, "The stock slide has multiple causes, including uncertainty about trading profits due to the slower economy and a drop in energy prices, as well as mounting concerns about the difficulty that investors face in figuring out how the company's extremely complex operations make money." The suspicions about the company's accounting is already there. However, no one realizes what they will find when they finally unravel them. In October, Enron reports a $6 million loss and a $1.2 billion write-down. In isolation, this should be a disaster, but this pleases E.M. Schultz. He says, "The scalpel is applied, a fresh start." He believes Enron has just gotten a little ahead of itself, and now they've gotten the bad news out of the way. Shares are trading at about $30 per share at this point. A week later, bad news is good news again. Part of the accounting scheme has come to light. It involves special purpose entities that CFO Andy Fastow was inappropriately using to hide losses. Fastow is fired, and E.M. Schultz writes, "This is good news. It shows that Lay will do whatever is necessary to regain credibility, which is what I'm betting on." Also, on this date we get some insight into what's at stake for our hero. He says that although he will not be increasing his Enron holdings, he holds a large position in his IRA. 2 hours later, he contradicts this and buys Enron shares on margin. 2 hours after that, he clarifies that his purchase was worth about $16,000 and brags that he's already up about $1,000. He's described himself as a skeptic, but he's skeptical of the wrong thing, media instead of management. Also, this set of posts shows us a key piece of E.M. Schultz's personality. He's what you'd call an alpha dog. He puts his money where his mouth is, and he thinks that you should too. Then, right or wrong, you're supposed to take it like a man. E.M. Schultz doesn't really have a problem with Enron, even though they're ultimately the ones to blame, but with third parties. The masses who have piled into the Enron board for the spectacle of it all are referred to as anthrax. Media members he believes are working in conjunction with hedge fund managers and manipulating the stock are referred to as terrorists. And this is happening only a month after 9/11, so the insult carries particular weight. He also calls them piranhas, and at one point neatly lists his enemies as whiners, wimps, preachers, post hoc analysts, neurotics, and sickos. On October 30th, with the share price around $13, a fellow poster refers to him as E.M. Putz, which he doesn't take well, remarking that, "I'll be damned if I'm going to take cheap shots from weak-kneed spectators who don't have the courage to get in the arena." It's no longer possible to take the position that Enron hasn't made mistakes or deserved to have its share price decline. E.M. Schultz now pivots towards the argument that the market, encouraged by the terrorists in the financial media, is overreacting. Often this involves but statements, such as on October 26th, when he writes, "Enron isn't out of the woods, but given all pertinent factors, it is an excellent buy at the current price level." By November 2nd, he can't take it anymore and makes another purchase. He claims that the market is irrationally pessimistic and cites an earnings multiple as justification. The stock closes around 12-ish on that day. What he fails to realize is that a company can only seem cheap on an earnings basis if the earnings are to be believed. And for some reason, he still thinks that management cheated, but just a little. On November 5th, with shares threatening to break 10, E.M. Schultz begins to crack. This probably isn't what depression looks like for most people, and I'm sure there's a performative aspect to it, but it doesn't seem to be the symptoms of a mentally healthy person either. Just look at it. 1 p.m. He quotes the book of Revelation, referring to certain posters as locusts. 5 p.m. He instructs another poster in great detail and with maximum condescension on how to spell his name correctly. Then at 8 p.m. he posts whatever this is. In fact, it's a quote from a academic work by D.G. Leahy called Foundation, Matter, the Body Itself. I couldn't tell you what it means if we're trying to make sense of it, but it has historically also been used as an example of entirely incomprehensible academic writing. So he may just be trying to say that nothing makes sense. And then he ends the quote by saying, "Accordingly, Enron goes up." This depression via absurdism seems to hold up when 2 days later, with the share price finally cracking the $10 barrier, E.M. Schultz makes a post that is just the full text of an old Chinese story, The Farmer, as told by Alan Watts. Not included in the quote is Watts's commentary, which summarizes the story's meaning. The whole process of nature is an integrated process of immense complexity, and it is really impossible to tell whether anything that happens in it is good or bad. Our hero has thrown up his hands at the world. Maybe later, somehow, this loss will prove to be a good thing for him. On November 8th, Enron restates its earnings going back to 1997, admitting that its income had been inflated by nearly $600 million. And E.M. Schultz is done blaming the media. He writes, "I reject exploitation, the abuse of position. Similarly, I reject victimology, allowing oneself to be abused, then wailing, 'Poor, poor me, it's all your fault,' when things don't go as one expected. If the leadership of Enron became rash and or vain, it is because the market, including me, rewarded them for what they were doing. 3 days later, we get another great analysis. He writes, "My intent is to peer through the fog and attempt to identify the reality that lies behind the illusion. Have I failed in that task over the past 2 years of commenting on Enron? Yes. But I don't blame anyone other than myself. Anyone who tries to shift the blame for their losses is, there's no other word for it, a sissy." The 5 stages of grief, ladies and gentlemen, Enron style. There's no scandal, your message board terrorists, the share price is overreacting, Alan Watts, and I don't blame anyone other than myself. On December 2nd, Enron files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Its stock closes at 26 cents. Now, you have to wonder, does taking a huge loss like this change someone? I mean, at the very least, he certainly lost a lot of money. Well, I found this posting from an E.M. Schultz on a different stock message board from October of this year, 2020. You tell me, do you think it's the same guy? Do you think he's changed? "Just put everyone who bothers you on ignore," he says. "Problem solved. Don't whine. Take control of your own destiny." So, I guess not. Thanks for watching, guys.